What is good? It is your boy, One Pooks, and unfortunately for y'all, today I'm taking y'all back to school in this video. We're going to learn how to get lethal, or at least how to calculate it, or make yourself pretty comfortable with the fact that you're going for lethal and you might as well win the game. This is just based on the fact that I have some insight. I've gone for, some crazy points, some swings that have won me the game because I had no other option but to swing in that order. And that's what I'm going to tell you how to do it. Make it a lot easier for you so you don't have to wait, 4 months of playing this game to figure out, okay, so my best out is just to go for it. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. I structured this very nicely, and I apologize if you can't read my handwriting. If you boil everything down, what is the game objective? Think about it. You want to compete for the board. That is control in an aspect, but also the game objective would be an ideal game with a perfect curve, which would be tempo, because you want to play out, the perfect card every turn you have that dawn available to you. That's how you maximize your tempo, get a huge board advantage. They go hand in hand. And then finally, every card game, your hand advantage as well as whatever your resources, dawn, making sure you're not just throwing it to the wind. You want to make sure you're using every resource you have to its fullest potential. When we think of all this, we could just scratch all of it because it has nothing really to do with going for lethal. That just makes it all complicated. Let's talk about that, that final 1 or 2 turns when it's like, okay, I have to go for it, or the game's about to end. How can I make this game end? And this is where we arrive at. So the hardest way for you to confirm a lethal or figure out lethal is to recall searches and know your opponent's deck list. Now, it's not to say it's hard to look at, a Zorro and be like, okay, I'm sure they're running, the straw package, maybe events if they played a buggy, etc., depending on your skill. Most people, you can't really account for the fact that you know their complete deck list. So this is actually really difficult, and this is kind of reserved for pro players because that's what it boils down to for them. It's what did they search, what do they have in hand, what haven't they trashed, and all that. The easiest way, in my opinion, is just to, consider a variable. I'm not going to break it down fully in math, but it's written in math here. Just imagine that every card in their hand is a 2K counter, except one is a 1K. That's how I like to do it. And this is a really easy way to just, attack with confidence when it's getting nitty and gritty. But also it's a safe way to just not overdo it early on and just overswing when they're just going to take the free card because they're not threatened. It's too, if it's too early in the game. This comes with practice and stuff, but this is just a super, super basic, estimate. Let's keyword estimate. We're just estimating what they have in their hand. That's all we can really do unless we actually know every card in their hand. And there are some ways you can do that, but once again, very complicated. This is a beginner. Simply put, expect the worst amount of counter in their hand. It's like you could just say they have all 2K counters in hand, but that's so unlikely. If you swing low early on, you're just going to slowly take cards out of their hand and then you're going to dwindle them, as opposed to, seeing a bunch of cards in hand, thinking you have to swing 15K to get that life hit. Nah, let them counter out. It's okay. It helps you in the long run. When they counter out, that adds to the trash. So, counting trash, very useful in meta matches, but for beginners, do you really know how many 2Ks they're running? Do you know, for the most part, you could assume 10 to 13, 10 to 12, maybe even 8 to 12. I don't know. I feel like deck lists have to run 10 minimum, but I'm sure there's 8, How could you tell that someone's running, 8 or 6 or 4 2Ks? There's more info gained from searches and, what they're doing with their deck. That's what you're going to have to get in-game, because you're not really going to know in that matchup unless it's super meta. Unless it's like, oh, I know this person's deck list in and out. Okay, well, that's an advantage, but in most matches, I don't know what they're running. So I'm just going to go off of very generalized things as well as look in their trash. Their trash will tell you if they're not running a meta deck. So that makes it a little bit easier too. So let's actually I'm not going to say boil it down. Let's go back to the basics. What is the number? Do you know the right number to attack with if you want to take cards out of their hand or be efficient? Well, if X is the defending card's power, well, in a game where your cards that are having counter have 1K or 2K, and you have to have more power than the attacker. Well, if you swing 2k over, then you have to have 2 cards that are counterable or an event. Otherwise, you know, if you disregard events, yeah, they have to give you 2 cards for that swing. So that is the number. You swing 2 over. So if it's a 6k leader, swing 8, etc., etc., etc. That is the basics of the game, and of course there's special cases, like, you know, we talk about Nami. Her game objective is a lot different than our game objective, but that being said, she also has lots of events. So, you know, in general, consider a 1 Dawn event is a 4k counter for red decks, purple decks, and then Nami. That's just because there's not really a yellow, black, or I mean, there is a blue one for Nami, but you won't see it in other decks. So they're very situational or conditional cards. Otherwise, you're going to see a general trend. Every Dawn is a 2k. So a 2 Dawn event has 4k counter plus an effect, and then a 3 Dawn event would have 6k counter plus an effect. Yada, yada, yada. Too complicated. You'll get it with experience. I have to put it in there. So let's look at some examples real quick, because I have to do this. I have to do this to them. I have to give you some, I have to make you think. So let's set up for lethal. 1, count their life. Call it L. Number 2, count blockers, or things that could potentially stop a swing. I mean, I didn't write that down, but there are cards that'll rest things on your field that make you have to consider, okay, maybe I should swing with that first so that it doesn't rest and remove that swing. You need to be able to think about that, or else, you know, you're not going to have a good time. You're probably just going to get outplayed, because some events play perfectly into not being aware of their existence, not swinging correctly because you're not playing around them. You know, for Enel and Yellow, I know they're a little bit different because they can have like an extra +1 or 2 life because of their leader effect and cards available to them in their life, but yada. Minimum swings would thus be, you know, the amount of life they have, plus the blockers, plus that 1 extra swing that connects and kills them. So, do you have the Dawn? That is the last question. Let's look at this example here. It's Whitebeard. I know he kind of looks like a pig, but my bad, gee. So, what's the first question? We need to know how many swings we have. How many swings would it take, in theory, to kill him? So, in this diagram here, there's 1 card with a D on it. That's a Dawn up, 2 Bs, 2 blockers, 1 life, and 5 cards in hand. That's kind of how I'm setting this up. Sorry if it's complicated. I'll probably just do it on the sim from here on out. I just wanted to get this video out there, but yeah, think about it. What are the minimum amount of swings if you knew guaranteed your swings are hitting every time? Well, you have to hit through 1 blocker, 2 blockers, a life, and then kill. So, yep, there you go. 1 + 2 + 1, 4. Gotta put 4 hits in. Alright, let's look at the cards in hand and see how much Dawn we need. So they have 5 cards in hand. They're revealing 1 Dawn, so one of those cards is probably an event. And if it's red, it's probably Rad Beam, which is a +4k. So, 4 cards in hand. Let's do that little math trick. 4 times 2,000 minus 1,000, 7k, plus that 1 event, that's 4k. They have 11k in hand. Let's be real here, you probably don't got lethal. I apologize, I don't want to be that guy, but yeah, that Whitebeard, you might as well let him draw that last life. In this case, it's fine. You just want to set up 1 more turn. Can you survive? And then just go for it next turn when they have no life. Try and kill that blocker maybe. So yeah, you wouldn't have lethal in that sense, but if you could go for board and try and kill those blockers, that's the play. Next up, we got Sakazuki, and sorry again, if I did this in the sim, you would see, you know, we would have like a hypothetical hand, and we could maybe make a play out of it, but in this case, let's just do just a quick little brief, like, idea. Like, you're in the situation, you're looking at the board state, you gotta imagine you have a board state of something, but who cares? This is just a practice. Minimum swings. Well, Sakazuki has 3 blockers, 0 life. Cool. 4 swings. How much Dawn do we need? Well, they have 6 cards. I don't see a Dawn up, so yeah, probably 11k. 11k counter in hand. Let's just assume that. Is this a possible lethal? I mean, depending on what cards you have, because green can rest blockers, yellow with a Maru on 1 life can rest blockers. You have a couple options. You know, there's especially with Sakazuki, you can't KO, so I'm really focusing on the resting aspect of blockers, but you know, blockers in life, they have their ins and outs. If they commit to blockers, then they are really weak to resting and KO effects, but Sakazuki can play Sabo, so you can't KO his board sometimes. Then again, other decks will just keep lots of life, so then, you know, they're just weak to lots of swings, they can't really deflect anything. So yeah, without a hand, we can't really talk, but let's look at this. In theory, another simple way to look at it is every character with power equal or greater to your opponent, whether it's their leader or a card or a character, you want to consider that a plus Dawn to lethal. So like that's a Dawn in your favor. So think about it like this. If you have a character with equal power to your opponent's leader, that is a +1 Dawn saved swinging, because they have to give out 1k counter just to survive or stop that hit. So yes, think of it kind of like if it's an equal 5k body, then when you swing, it is like saving a Dawn because you are asking a card. You don't have to pay a Dawn to get that card out of hand. Or like, you know, even if you're 5k, it makes more sense with a 4k, but by this logic, an 8k body would be, you know, +4. It would be a +4 advantage, because for a 5k leader, they would need 4k counter because the defender would have to get over 8k to block out. So let's look at the math with another example with actual cards, because this time I have the budget to do it. So like in a vacuum, let's just pretend like you have 10 Dawn, they have 0 life. The only way for Katakuri to counter out of this, right, is by having 11k counter, because a 15k swing, bear with the leader, can only be countered out with 11k. So Dofi wins every time Cat has less than 6 cards. Let's imagine with no Dawn up, you know? So 10 Dawn, 15k swing. Because even if they had as many 2k counters, 5 2k counters in hand, you have to have 6 cards minimum. So if you think about it like that, it kind of actually simplifies everything. So let's give us a board here. Let's look at this. So look at this. Let's apply my math here. So this Viola on the left is a 3k body. So therefore, it would cost 2 Dawn to swing at their life to a 5k life Katakuri leader, which means it's like a -1 Dawn, because you're paying 2 Dawn just to demand a 1k counter. Whereas if you look at Doflamingo, he's a 10k body, so let's consider that'd be +6 Dawn, because they would need 6k counter to counter out of that kind of swing. So if you had 10 Dawn and they had like some sort of life or like a ridiculous amount of cards in hand like this Katakuri did, the only way this Katakuri would survive, you know, in the best chance possible, is with 17k counter in hand, because putting 10 Dawn on to Doflamingo and swinging 20k would mean they need 16k to get out of that swing, plus a 5k swing from the leader, which would be another 1k. So extra bodies give extra swings. If they had, you know, a blocker on the field, then and less cards in hand, then your best plan is to actually not stack it on one and just split it. So you want to go, you know, maybe I would do 6 on Viola, 4 on leader, and then Doflamingo swings 10k at the very end, and that's like the best way to split it up. If they had like 2 blockers, and instead of a crazy hand that could potentially have 16 or 17k counter in it. Anywho, you need to remember your opponents will try and bait you, especially if they're good. They will make you feel comfortable in winning the game, and then, you know, they'll pull something out of their bum, and you'll be like, oh, great, I just swung with my blocker, it's over now. So do not blame me if you go for it and you don't realize that there's a way they can come back. Sometimes there is no lethal. Wink, wink, the only option becomes survive, because then next turn you can go for lethal. And if you think about it like that, it's so much easier just to like play a game and realize, like we're getting kind of down to the wire and I'm not looking too hot. If you think you can survive, I would, you know, obviously push survivability over ending the game with lethal on your side. You know, you might as well push it a turn, because if it gives you a more favorable position, then it's good. And, you know, there are chances you give them a favorable position, like some yellow decks can just bounce back. Surviving a turn gives you another chance at lethal. So in a different way to frame this, let's say you can't survive another turn. do you know what your only option is in that sense? Yeah, you would go for lethal. And that is my best word of advice. This graphic is stupid and I don't really understand it either, so thanks for the criticism if you have any. I beat you to it. But think about it like that, you know? Sometimes lethal can appear, and it could just be because you have no other option, because you can't survive another turn. Make a decision that's good. Just make sure you make the decision you're comfortable with. Like, my insight is only here just to let you know that, yes, you can squeak out a win because you just, like, happen to swing 7, 7, 8 with, you know, all you put 4 Dawn on a bunch of, like, weak chumps or 3, you know, you put your Dawn everywhere and just somehow won the game. You know, it looks stupid. You ruined all your chances of surviving next turn, but that's because you ended the game this turn. There are chances that happens. It comes with experience. I still totally blow my load too early and lose, you know, swing for the game and then realize, oh, they had like a 0 cost event, things like that. You get the experience as you come by, but this is a huge way to win games, is just realizing when there's no other choice but to just go for it. That is your opportunity. Anyway, I don't want to be long-winded. I want to end this. I want this to be live and out of my hair. So here you go. Enjoy. This is the video. Let me know what you think. I'll be back with more sim stuff soon. Peace.